Hello. Nice to see all of you in the room. I have a few folks joining us remotely as well. Thanks so much to the Staff Development Subcommittee of SAC of inviting me. I'm happy to speak on this topic. I was given, I think, some liberty as to what to present. So there were questions submitted in advance, and so I've incorporated those into the presentation, and certainly stop me along the way if you have other questions. And then also have a donut. Happy Spring Staff Appreciation Week. I appreciate you. Have a pastry. I checked because I was like, oh, I don't think I can bring donuts to the School of Public Health. And I was told that donuts are okay in moderation. So I felt like I had, I was, first year there were no donuts. Is that it? That's the moderation? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about HR and academic personnel. I'm going to start like super big picture. And then I'm going to go narrow, like down to like our staff. Kind of work sort of like a funnel. Okay, so just a few, before we launch into all the good HR stuff, just a few reminders on some things I've been working with our Staff Advisory Council on. So one is there's 2 new web pages on our for faculty and staff portion of the website. One is dedicated to recognition. There is on that page a table of sort of all the formal award programs. When they happen, who's eligible, how to nominate. I had been hearing that, it's sort of understandably difficult to keep those things all straight. So that's a resource. And then also we keep trying to plug, we've developed these super cute little appreciation postcards. So if you want to just write a cute note, a quick note of thanks to someone who, comes through for you, this is just to help sort of enable that. So these are available in this building in a couple different spaces. And I was just talking to our friends from HIA about making some available over in U-Haul. And anyways, so get one, give one. Praise it forward. Okay. Also learning in the learning and development space, which is very much where we are today. There's also a new learning and development webpage on our website that essentially inventories all of the various learning and development opportunities that are available to us as staff. There is a plethora of online trainings, in-person trainings, on-demand, scheduled, workshops, classes, e-learning, like all the stuff, communities of practice. So take a look at that. It's meant to be sort of, you can start there, and then it pops you off through interactive, hyperlinks to where more information lives about the various opportunities. And then we've also introduced a sort of quarterly challenge for our staff, where if in any given quarter, so that's a 3-month period, you participate in like 3 hours of learning and development, then you can submit a little web form that's on that learning and development page, and then you'll get a little recognition, and you'll be entered into a raffle for a gift card, just to help make it a little more fun. And so being here today, this counts as 1 hour. This is part of this, and if you've come to, if you come to these regularly, like you already met the challenge. So there's a little like survey that you fill out that just says kind of, what you did, and it's all honor system. I'm not then going and somehow like auditing that and whatever. So it's honor system. And I'll say, I think for this first quarter, which ends at the end of March, I think 5 people so far have sort of met the challenge and submitted a web form. So far their odds are pretty good to get that $50 gift card. So it would encourage others to take a look and play along. Okay. So big picture, and then I swear I'll get down. But obviously we are a part of the University of California system. It's a 10-campus system. And we are supported by the UC Office of the President, that we usually refer to as UCOP. And we are governed by the UC Board of Regents. And then there obviously is a map of California, and we're right there. And we are, the first and the best. we come down sort of one step down and looking in terms of the overall campus. So we have, let's see if I mouse, will you see my mouse? You guys will, maybe the online people won't, right? But of course we have our chancellor, Carol Christ. And then her number 2 is Paul Alabasatos, and he is the executive vice chancellor and provost. So you often hear him referred to as the EVCP. But essentially what he has is 2 jobs, the executive vice chancellorship and the provostship. And that's why in his box, he actually has 2 lines coming out of him. The executive vice chancellor piece of his job is essentially he is the top vice chancellor. And the other vice chancellors report to him in that capacity. His other job is the provost. And with that hat on, the vice provosts report to him, as do the deans. And so one, I don't know, tip or trick is when you hear like provost versus like a vice provost versus a vice chancellor, the provost piece is the faculty side. So that's why the deans report to the provost side and the vice provosts report to the provost side, and the vice provosts are really dealing with the faculty, such as our vice provost for faculty, Ben Hermelin. Whereas the chancellor side is like the stuff that isn't just the faculty. So that's sort of the, I don't know, the differentiation there. And then the chancellor has, in addition to the EVCP reporting to her, the folks all the way on the right side that are in a variety of roles. But this is the org chart for the sort of the executive campus leadership, with then our boss highlighted in yellow over there with the list of deans.
Are we gonna get this shared too?
Yes,
yeah.
I'll send out that.
Just because I'm sort of curious, I'd love to look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe include a new staff orientation.
Yes, which we were going to work on soon,
Nice to know.
like day 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. You get all these emails, you're like, I don't know.
Who these people are, where to place them, yeah. So you'll end up, like you see probably a lot of emails from our Vice Chancellor for Administration, Mark Fisher. This is where like CSS rolls up to. This is where Central HR lives. We also see stuff from Joe Magnus. Yeah, so she is in this box reporting to Mark. So she's an assistant vice chancellor. And there's all these org charts are all available. It's like all this, like so many things. It's all there, but you have to like know to go look for it. But they have all sorts of these org charts and then that dig into each layer that they seem to keep relatively updated. If you're very curious. Okay. So then if we go down, sort of the next level down and are thinking about the schools and colleges. So this is what we refer to, right, as the academic side of the house. This is where all the learning goes on. And UC Berkeley has a number of colleges, including chemistry, engineering, environmental design, natural resources, and the College of Letters and Science, which is huge and is divided into divisions. 4 of their divisions house ladder rank faculty. So that's arts and humanities, biological sciences, math, physical sciences, and social sciences. There's a 5th LNS division for undergraduate education, but they aren't included here because they don't have their own standalone faculty. The faculty sort of live in these departments elsewhere in the college. So that's just, anyways, this slide I have doesn't depict them. And this slide also does not include the new division of data science that maybe you've seen some emails about, because I don't even know where that's going to go. It's this very in process, evolving, creating thing, and it's not totally clear, like, it's not really going to be a college or school. I don't know. Anyhow, so as things continue to evolve. And then we have the professional schools, right? There are 9 of us, including public health. Question, anybody, what are the differences between a college and a school? Anybody?
I was looking forward to finding out.
Okay.
It says one's academic and one is professional, so when you get a
Yes, somewhat, yes. Okay. So a couple distinct differences. So one is colleges have departments, right? So like looking, for example, at the top of the College of Chemistry. So the College of Chemistry then actually has two departments, the Department of Chemistry and the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, CBE. And those are recognized by the campus as departments. And each of those departments has a department chair, a department manager, and those departments then report into the College of Chemistry's dean's office. And obviously, chemistry is somewhat unique in that they only have two departments, whereas if you look at, say, the Division of Arts and Humanities, right, I think they have something like 19 different departments. And each of those departments within each of those colleges are degree giving. The colleges also are, I would say, more heavily, in contrast to the professional schools, more heavily focused on the undergraduate education. So they do offer master's programs and doctoral programs, and some only do doctoral and not master's, and some have master's and not doctoral. But like that's where the bulk of the undergraduate education is happening, or in the colleges, and in LNS in particular, right? They're the biggest chunk. The professional schools are much more flat. We are actually each of the 9 professional schools by the campus are considered just one department. So Will is our dean, but also is our department chair. So he actually, all of the professional school deans sort of have this dual role because each school also is one department. So we even though we give out many different kinds of degrees, they're all coming out of sort of one department, and and we have division heads, but they aren't recognized by campus the way department chairs are. So the schools have a sort of a flatter organization. And we have an undergraduate program, although that's relatively new in the grand scheme of things in our 75-year history. So the professional schools are a little more focused on graduate education, and then some have undergraduate programs as well. And the degrees that we grant are professional degrees, right? The concept is that if you go to the School of Optometry, you're going to become an optometrist or an ophthalmologist or something in that nature. If you go to the law school, right, you're going to get your JD and you're going to be a lawyer. If you come to public health, you're going to get your master's in public health, your doctorate in public health, with the idea that you are going to then go be a public health practitioner. I, as an undergrad, was in English. What do you do with an English degree? Write a really good email. I don't know. Like, it's not. So that's some of the difference there, is sort of what comes next in terms of our graduates. So there's a difference between a school and a college. Sometimes we get referred to as the College of Public Health. And I'm like, no, we're a school.
We used to be. We have all the old handbooks.
Oh, yeah?
In MCAH, because we used to be the one department was MCAH, or MCH, I should say. We used to be a college.
Huh.
Like 40 years ago.
Like way back when.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, well, no, maybe I don't literally remember. I remember hearing about, we used to have, then at one point there were 2 divisions, Division A and Division B.
Yeah, that's it. I think there were departments.
But it was still, anyway, so things evolve. But this is where we are today and how we sort of fit in to the picture of the academic side of the house. Okay, so then let's take a closer look just at the professional schools. So these are sort of our comparative group, right? So this is as of October, and this is total employee headcount. And as some of you have heard, like so this is employee headcount, although keep in mind this also includes our like non-employees, like our visiting scholars and our affiliates. This gets counted into this total. But when I came across this table, I was like, wow, look at that. So you see, obviously, Haas, as probably you would guess, is the largest in terms of their employee population, followed by law, and then us. So in terms of the professional schools, we're the 3rd largest, and not by a lot behind the business school and the law school. And then, though, as you see, there's then a sharp kind of drop off to number 4, which is optometry, which is less than half our size. And then it sort of goes down from there with the School of Journalism having an employee population of only 140 people. So even though we are like one department, we're a big department, as I'm sure you kind of live and breathe. Right? So that's us. Surprising? Not surprising? Good to know? Interesting?
Interesting.
I find it interesting. The only two above us are ones that have a bigger revenue stream.
Yep.
And are kind of have their own registrar system and almost completely independent.
Yep. And so we're like them, but then not like them in terms of resources for sure.
The poor cousin.
Yeah, right. So I mean, part of
Or step.
her step cousin. Yeah. So part of being a part of the professional school group and giving professional degrees means that we also charge our professional degree supplemental tuition, right? PDST.
Where does that go? That's always the big question.
That is, I don't know the answer to that with any goodness. I know a big chunk of it we put back into financial aid making for our own students, but I don't know the percent. I don't know off the top of my head the sort of the percentage of how that gets divvied up.
Kind of rhetorical.
It comes to us, but then how we use it is much more Emily
Emily will be
Schwartz's.
the next guest.
Yes, will be Emily Schwartz's territory. But each of the professional schools gives professional degrees, charges this extra professional degree supplemental tuition, but at a different rate. And each of the schools has to go through, I think it's a biannual process where we kind of say like, well, here's how much we want to charge and why, and has to get approved and whatnot. Haas and Law, I don't even know what the number is, but it's way more expensive than we are. So that's part of their additional revenue is they charge more for their degrees than we do, right? And then they also have alumni that go off and often make a lot of money. And then give back. And we have a lot of folks that go out and do a lot of really good stuff in the world, but not often for, the same sort of, in the same salary bracket. And so I think our alumni are also in a different place in terms of their giving. So there's all sorts of reasons that contribute to that. But to Marissa's point, yeah, we're big like them, and then we have more constraints and sort of play by different rules when it comes to, like they've got a lot of their own systems and sort of have gone their own course. Okay, so then this is then coming to one step sort of down again. This is our employee population. So of our 819 people, this is how they are sort of spread out by employee type buckets. And I'm going to talk more in subsequent slides, specifically about the graduate student titles and the student titles, as well as staff, and as well as the 3 faculty types. So the reason I put the 2 stars there was to remind myself to talk about those, because I don't talk about them later. There is a category that, at least in CalAnswers, is referred to as other academic. These are folks that I always try and keep in mind, because these, and I'm looking, and I don't think we have anyone in the room because we're all staff here. We always talk like students, faculty, and staff, and I'm like, what about the academics? So this is a group that in our school, includes over 100 people of our community, are academic coordinators of public programs, field program supervisors, fieldwork consultants, postdocs, project scientists, researchers, specialists. All those folks fall into this category that they're not staff and they're not faculty. And so I always try to be deliberate. Maybe they don't, I care about this more than they do, I don't know, but I always try to be like staff, faculty, and academics. So there's this whole group that sort of gets somewhat sort of forgotten about, and they sort of are in between. And so these are, folks that we all work with every day, but that's certainly a part of our school. And then the other stars around our non-employees. So again, these are included in our employee count, even though they're not payrolled. They're not paid by us. And these are our visiting scholars, visiting student researchers, as well as our volunteers. Sometimes we have these people called consultants, where there's a purchase order in bear buy to pay for their services, but they need a Berkeley email address, or they need, anyway, so we give them a consultant appointment in HCM so that they can still have some of the access and things. And then there's UC affiliates, which we have tons of. And so these are often folks that are at UCSF or sort of elsewhere in the UC system, and they're research collaborators, and they need to be able to CalNet to be able to access, some collaboration SharePoint tool or whatever. So then we do these affiliate appointments. so that they can have a Berkeley identity essentially. But again, they're not paid. So those are the two other groups that's all I'm going to say, unless there's questions about those guys and gals. Okay.
Actually,
Yeah.
for the academics, maybe in the future, I don't know how many, well, there's 104 of them. Maybe they can have their own category for recognition and awards.
Yeah.
There's for staff, there's for faculty, and there's no recognition for them, and they can't apply to the faculty, and they can't apply to the staff.
Yes.
Could you repeat her
Yeah. So the comment is around, so our other academic group, and that not only gets sort of forgotten about sometimes, but there's programs that have been established for staff and for faculty, especially in the recognition space, that they aren't eligible for. I mean, this is totally the case with like the STAR Awards. These are our SPOT Awards and our Achievement Awards, where an academic coordinator, let's say, like they're not eligible, but there is no program for them. So I think that's a shame. And I think there's some, work we could do there to think about that. We have, so in our school, right, we have the FAC, which is the Faculty Advisory Council. We have the SAC, which is the Staff Advisory Council. And then we have the TRAC. And the TRAC is the Teaching and Research Advisory Council, which is meant to sort of be that third piece, to sort of be sort of minding that other part of the population. TRAC has had, they're not sure, they haven't had, they were kind of tried to kind of get something going, and there wasn't a lot of engagement from their population, and so they've been going through some evolution themselves. But yeah, I mean, that's, your point is very true. Like it's like we should do something, and what and who manages it is sort of what remains to be seen.
Well, also, I don't know if the people who have those titles how they identify. Do they, like, I'm thinking of our postdocs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you said an academics, I don't know if they would be like, oh, that includes me.
Yeah.
Or if they had a group together, how much their roles are similar, where they could do group sharing. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's such a like mixed bag, that it makes it more challenging. And it's a good point about like, how do people identify? Like the DICE climate survey last year, but we're going to work with DICE on this year. You go in and you report like, what are you, right? And there were all kinds of different like categories of students, and then there was staff and there was faculty. And so when we looked at the data, it was like, well, how did these people report? And then if we wanted like drill in just to the staff data, like, is it really just staff respondents, or were folks like, well, I have to identify some way, and my choice isn't there. Anyway, so trying to get some more detail there. Teresa?
In the CSS, the HR hires submitted ticket, they always categorize them as non-standard academic.
Uh-huh.
So that is the group there, but we are not consistently using the same term.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about those. I'm getting to the faculty side, because so yes, that all group, this group, the other academic group, all are non-Senate academics, but they're not the only non-Senate academics. And that's where it gets fun. So you're like, oh my God, there's so much vocabulary to keep straight. So I'm going to get to that one maybe next, actually. Well, let's see. I can't remember what next thing is. Okay. Oh no, we're going to do students. Okay, so someone submitted a question in advance around like, what's the difference between different student workers? GSIs, GSRs, research assistant, work study student, like what are all these things and how are they different? So I tried to put a little table together. So GSIs, graduate student instructors, they support teaching. That's the instructor part. It's a represented classification. These are, that group are represented by a union. They typically receive partial fee remission, and they have like a monthly fixed salary. There's also readers and tutors in this group, right? So GSIs plus readers plus tutors are called academic student employees, ASEs. So when you hear ASE, that's primarily GSIs, but also readers and tutors. And we have readers and tutors both in our school. But for whatever reason, readers and tutors can actually also be non-students. Like you can hire a staff person to be a reader. So it also is this odd, not gray area, but sort of this other mixed odd bag.
You can have undergraduates be the GSI.
Can you have an undergraduate be a GSI by exception?
Only at
Only at Cal. Okay.
Or undergrad class.
correct, but usually GSIs are for graduate students.
Have to work that way.
If an undergraduate student is hired as a GSI, they get the fee remission too? Like just same?
Engineering has a lot of them.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Do we have undergraduates serving as GSIs? Do we know? I don't know.
We have undergraduates serving as teachers assistants, which is a whole other
Category.
They're unpaid.
Ah, okay. So then there's GSR, right? The R stands for research. So these folks support the research side. These are not represented, right? So you have like GSI represented, GSR not represented. Just means, there's different sort of rules that we play by there. And they typically receive either partial remission or full fee remission. And they also have a monthly fixed salary. And then I'm going to come back to the little warning. And so then we have student assistants, and there's 3 levels. There's student 2, student 3, student 4. And so those have different sort of salary ranges that equate. And this link at the bottom that I've put, which then will go out with the slides, kind of helps you to think through, like, should the student you're hiring be a 2 or 3 or 4? So it gives sort of examples of like equivalent sort of staff jobs to help you think about, like, oh, this is sort of the work's sort of like this other thing, and so that's would warrant a student 3. But all three levels have very broad salary ranges that also like overlap. So it's not very stringent, I guess I'd say. And student assistants support a variety of needs, and their working titles could be any number of things, right? So an office assistant might be a working title for a student assistant. A research assistant could be a working title for a student assistant. And these are also not represented positions. There's no fee remission, and this is a straight hourly variable salary, right? So they're real-time employees. They report their hours. They sort of clock in and out in cal time, and they get paid for their hours worked, and there isn't the remission piece of it. These are undergraduate students, but can also be graduate students. Okay, so that isn't, I think there's a misnomer about like student assistants and work study students are only for undergraduates, and it's not true. Grad students can be in there as well. And student assistants may or may not include work study program participation. So work study is a component of our financial aid program on campus. And students, not all students qualify, and then not every student that qualifies takes advantage. But essentially, if a student qualifies for work study and then participates in that, and you hire them through the work study program into a student assistant job, you end up essentially paying for half the salary. It's actually 40%, and then there's a fee. But anyways, in the wash, it comes out to be 50%. So if you hire them at, say, $18 an hour, you're paying $9 an hour. And the other $9 an hour that they're earning is coming out of the work study financial aid program, and means that they are earning that money instead of having to take it out as a loan. So it's really like, it's a win-win, right? They're lower cost to us. It's also allowing them to earn compensation instead of be loaned compensation, which reduces their debt in the end. But again, there's not like a requirement in our school that you can only hire students that have work study eligibility. And students also sometimes, they have different, like how much they can earn varies from student to student. And so sometimes if you hire someone at the beginning of the year and they're working a lot, they might kind of run out of work study funds along the way, and you can continue to employ them. It's just that then you're going to pick up their full hourly rate instead of having the subsidy. So the warning piece around the GSRs, okay, so with GSRs, you can hire them at different percentages, and based on the percentage, they either get no fee remission, partial fee remission, or full fee remission, okay? So sometimes I've seen people that are like, I don't have the money to pay the remission, so I'm gonna hire this person as a 20% GSR because then there's no remission with their appointment. But then that student goes and gets a second GSR in another department, or goes and gets a GSI in another department. Those appointments get added together, And so you've gone and done this like no remission appointment, and you think, yeah, I'm just paying their hourly salary, and then they get this other graduate student appointment that then combines, triggers fee remission, and now you will be paying your portion. So if they're 20% with us and 20% elsewhere, kind of 50-50, you're going to end up getting hit with 50% of the fee remission. And it definitely like blindsides people. And especially if like we hire first and then that's the second job, and then all of a sudden your ledger, you're like, what happened? So I have tried to sort of caution people, or something to keep in mind is if you really do not want to pay remission, and not that you don't want to, we all want to, but you can't financially, hire them as a student assistant. And then you would just sort of like not at risk for this secondary appointment triggering remission issue. And again, graduate students can be hired as student assistants. And if you want, and feel it's appropriate, maybe for graduate students, maybe you're going to set their hourly rate a little higher because you're not doing the remission piece, right? And I think the student assistant range goes up to like $50 an hour or $55, or I mean, something very generous. Maybe that we wouldn't do that, but it's a potential. Any student, pause. Other questions about students or how they differ? Student employees?
I think I might be mentioning the GSI and GSR, but I think for the GSR, the paperwork they have to fill out, they do have to list their other positions or financial aid they're getting. So you can review that if they already know, but it's just afterwards if you're the first.
If you're the first, yeah. And so it's not, we tell our students, right, like, well, let us know if you're trying to get another job or what, but that's, anyways, because sometimes has issues.
So question, why would anybody hire them as a GSR then?
Oh, because we have a lot, so there are many, many times where there is the budget and the commitment to do the fee remission. So a lot of times in sponsored projects, like sponsored contracts and grants, they've specifically budgeted in for GSRs that takes into account both the hourly salary and the fee remission. And we as a school, right, like we want whenever we can to be supporting our graduate students financially. And often I have seen, I'm not in student services, but many of you are, but I've seen like when we make offers of admission and we kind of talk about like in your first year this and your second year that, and sometimes we talk about like, we'll help you to make sure that you get either a GSI or GSR position that will come along with the remission as a part of their sort of their package. So it's a budgetary thing, but often there's specific budget for it. And faculty that participate in FESREP, which is the Faculty Salary Research Exchange Program, where essentially our ladder rank faculty can charge a portion of their academic year time to one of their contracts and grants. That then like creates this like offset, right? Because normally they're getting paid off the state funds, but then they put a chunk of their effort on one of their research projects. And so now that state fund gets kind of freed up and gets reallocated to the faculty as a discretionary fund. And often they use that to support additional GSRs so that we can pay more remission because it makes us a more attractive place to be.
And it looks better on their resume, right? Like a GSR than a student assistant. I mean, in terms of them and what you offer and the boost.
Yes, although, so I've heard that sometime, and I think where we get hung up or something is like, I'm like, even if in the HR system they are classified as a student assistant 3, on their CV, they can be more liberal in terms of, I mean, with maybe their faculty's permission, but they could say graduate student researcher. I mean, if that's what they're, we do want to try and be, often the student assistant titles are used when they're not, for sure they're not doing instruction. Okay, if they're doing instruction, they need to be a GSI or a reader or tutor, like for real. Often student assistants are not also then like really in the labs doing research. That's really when a GSR is appropriate. And so there is sort of a fine line, like if they really are doing full-blown research, like you really want to put them in a GSR because that's really what's appropriate. And then it's like, but then you got to pay the remission, so hopefully you have it. And so where we have, anyway, it's a little bit of a blurred line where you have students that are really engaged in research and yet we're paying them as a student assistant. But again, like sometimes we don't have the money to do the remission piece, and we still want to be able to employ them, and they want to be employed.
And also student assistants do not have benefits at all. They have no benefits.
Well, they have benefits through being a student.
Well, she's meaning the fee remission helps offset their cost of insurance. So
Oh, full remission, or one of the, do partial and full have the SHIP, or it's not called SHIP anymore?
Anyway.
Yeah. What's that?
Well, they used to be that the student fee remissions were very far apart.
Yeah,
Now they're really close.
close. Like partial and full, it's like a
It's
difference of
almost-
1 fee or 2
yeah.
bus pass or something, right?
700.
Okay, yeah. Okay, oh, let me keep going. Okay, so faculty. So question was, there's sort of a lot of different vocabulary related to faculty. There's like, you hear about ladder and FTE faculty and Senate faculty, non-Senate faculty, like what's the difference? So what I've attempted to draw here is all 3 of these circles, like this, the whole pie is the faculty. Okay, but if we start at the very, like the center circle, the sort of darkest blue circle, these are our ladder rank faculty, which is the same thing as an FTE faculty. So if you hear those 2 terms, that's talking about the same thing. These are folks that are assistant professor, associate professor, which we also call like full professor, or our professor emeritus. Ladder rank faculty, what the ladder implies is that they are tenure track. So these are the folks that are funded centrally. These are also sometimes called 19900 faculty. 19900 is the fund number associated with the funding that we receive from the state of California. And we have a very limited number of these, right? So between our assistant, associate, and full professors, we're at 43 or something like that. And when those folks retire someday, eventually, and then they become emeritus, they're sort of still in that bucket. They still sort of hold many of the same rights and privileges. These are the group that we get authorized to like hire these folks. And each year we get maybe like authorized for like 1, or maybe 2, or maybe none. So this current year we were authorized for 1, and we ran a search in the biostatistics area, which was successful, and we have a new faculty member, a new assistant professor that will be starting in July. But this is the ones that actually like move up the ladder, and when they typically go from assistant and then go up to associate, with that is the tenure review. And then they have tenure, which is sort of like, forever. And that's why that, and because of the central funded, like we're limited in how many we're allowed to have. And we go through a big request process every year to get that authorization. Going out sort of 1 circle though is then the Senate faculty. And the Senate faculty includes everybody in the dark circle, like includes all the ladder faculty. And then also includes professor in residence, of which we have more and more. And also this professor of clinical blank. We have one of those, Coco, in JMP. Yeah. And those, I didn't word it all out, but those also have assistant, associate, and full sort of levels, ranks within them. So the Senate faculty then, so the ladder plus those extra guys and gals, are a member of the academic senate. So that's what Senate refers to. And the academic senate is system-wide. There's a UC system-wide academic senate, and then each campus has its own, there's some term for it, but like the Berkeley whatever of the academic senate. They have then specific sort of also sort of rights and privileges that come with being a Senate faculty member. There's different voting rights, for example, like what sort of appointment actions or tenure cases, like do they get to vote on or not get to vote on. But they, for the most, the intention there is that all the Senate faculty are very highly engaged in our shared governance process, or the faculty shared governance process, where they all essentially have the right to be at the table in terms of making decisions about the governance of the faculty stuff. Does that sound reasonable?
And coursework, right? And like other, besides faculty, don't they also make votes on different like coursework or other academic things that aren't directly related to faculty positions?
They have all of these, I can send some links out about it. They have all these committees within the academic senate. There's finance committees and curriculum committees and so, but you have to be a member of the Senate to be on one of the committees. But yeah, they have sort of tentacles out into other.
Right. So they vote and have a say on different things beyond just
Yes.
linear stuff.
Yeah. Here, like locally, it's voting on our academic advancement cases of our faculty. But yeah, there's broader campus involvement.
And how many, I'm sorry, of SPH faculty fall into that category?
That is okay. So there's about 45 in the middle circle, or in the dark blue circle, and then there are. Well, okay. So there's about 45 professor, associate, and assistant professors, and then there's about 50 emeriti, and then in the next out, I'm trying to think. That's another. Or maybe that whole Senate circle is like 150, because then the adjuncts and the health science clinical professors and the lecturers are another, there's like 50 lecturers.
Okay, never mind. I thought it would be easy.
Well, it's weird because the other like buckets don't totally align.
Yeah, I just remember there was a conversation once about how the people that were eligible to be on those committees up on campus were not necessarily serving, which wasn't good for
Yes,
because
service is
we need people up there representing us.
Yes, and we have so many service obligations within our school because of how we are self-structured that folks get sort of tapped out in their internal service commitments, and then are like, I don't have time to go serve on a campus-wide committee. But when they go up for review, and not just for tenure review, but just up for their merits and their other kinds of academic cases, like the campus wants to see they're also doing campus-wide service or even system-wide service. And so when folks like all they do is school service, it doesn't serve them well. And then to your point, it's not serving sort of the school well, but there's a lot of like, there's just too many choices, too much to do. Yeah, roughly there's like 50 lectures, 50 emeriti, like 45 ladder rank, and then like 55 of these sort of others that fall into both the Senate and non-Senate groups. That's how I think of it. So it just doesn't align perfect. Then the lightest blue one are still faculty, but these are non-Senate faculty. So these are our adjunct professors and our health science clinical professors, which aren't entirely in JMP, but are primarily in JMP, and our lecturers. So these folks are faculty, but they are not members of the academic senate. They don't have those rights and privileges. What always strikes me about this, like, so we think about staff and the hierarchy and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, just within the faculty group, though, there's like this crazy hierarchy.
They have to leave the room when they go for a vote. So
yeah.
People have to
leave.
Stand outside while the elite group is voting on.
Yeah, it's very interesting and weird. And like, we think sometimes about like, oh, staff are such second-class citizens or whatever, which, and sometimes is demonstrated. Sure. But then even just within the almighty faculty, right, like there is this really like class system. And for sure the adjuncts that are very much a part of our school and are critical. Likewise, the health science clinical faculty, they just sort of are sort of a third
well, like for
class.
our faculty, though, this is only one piece of the world they inhabit.
Right.
They all have clinical jobs, and they're not full time.
Yeah. So even within the faculty, there's a hierarchy. Okay. So it's staff. Sorry. And then I'll be quicker. Sorry, I'm so bad. I always pack way too much into things. Okay. So staff classification. So this is fun. Okay. So classification of a staff position is really, it's based on the duties, the responsibility, the scope, and the complexity. So if you've ever seen, and I hope you've seen your job description, it talks about like problem solving and about the responsibilities, the requirements and stuff, right? It's really about the position. And there's two main categories of non-academic staff classification. So staff classification sort of fall into two big buckets of represented and non-represented. Represented means they're covered by a collective bargaining unit contract, so like a union, and non-represented means no union, and non-represented staff are covered by what's known as the PPSM, which is the Personnel Policy for Staff Employees. So it's like the rule book. And then each of the various unions has their own sort of rule book. And then within PPSM, there are three groups. PSS, which is professional support staff, which is where the vast majority of our staff sit. And then there is MSP, which is the management and senior professionals. We have MSP in our school as well, but less so than the PSS. And then the senior management group, we don't have any of those here, the SMG. Those are like the vice chancellors, but they're covered by the same policies. And then each classification falls within a job family, a job function, a category, and a level. And then each classification is mapped to a salary grade, which has a corresponding salary range. So the colorful diagram shows, right, so job family is sort of the biggest bucket. And then within a job family, there are specific functions. And within those functions, then there are levels. And over on the right, it's kind of small, but essentially like there's salary grades 15 through 30. Salary grade, for example, 15 through 18 are just PSS, whereas 19 through 25, some of them are MSP positions and some are PSS positions. And then 26 through 30 are just at the MSP level. And then each grade has a minimum, midpoint, and maximum range. The midpoint is meant to be market when they set it based on some set of data. I would love, and where we can, I mean, we have so little ability to do big movements, but where we are able to just slowly, incrementally move everyone towards the midpoint, that's where we want to be, if not beyond it. And we have in our school, folks are sort of all over the place. For the most part, folks are within what's called the second quartile. So it's sort of like, so there's the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum. There's actually like 4 quartiles, right? And most of our folks are sort of in that second quartile. So they're not they're halfway between the minimum and midpoint, and the real midpoint. Is that, anyway. And so we use that a lot, like when we come through our annual like merit and equity review process, is we want to look to it where we are, where each of our people are, where each of our employees are relative to the midpoint. And then we look at, as an average, where that classification is relative to the midpoint campus-wide, so that we can ensure that we're at least being competitive with the other employers on campus, if not quite yet at a place where we're competing with the market. So it's a work in progress for sure. Okay, UC Berkeley has 757 non-represented staff classifications, like for real. We, thankfully, in the school are only using 53 of those classifications, plus an additional 9 represented staff classifications. So we have 62 different classifications within our school, just within our staff population, right? And if we have roughly like 150 staff, and we have, whatever I said, 62 classifications, right? We have lots of onesies and twosies. This is just an example. So there are 20 job families. These are the biggest buckets, or the job families, and there's 20 of those. And if you just read, through the job families, I mean, there's a really wide range of work that staff are doing on this campus. And we certainly do not have all these job families in our school, right? We don't have skilled crafts and trades, but you will definitely see that in physical plant, right? The folks that are going and like actually fixing the steam valves or whatever in U-Haul fall into that category. This is just, for example, this is just the communications job family. So the job families, communications, and then the job function is that next bucket down, and then you get into like the actual specific job titles. So it's huge. There's so many, and this is why and a lot of revolves around like your classification. So I have this dream of doing this other project, which maybe we can do in the fall, of like asking everybody to look at their job description and seeing if it's like current and like correct and like where we need to like potentially reclassify positions because things are out of whack. Because a lot ends up being, there's a lot of decisions that get made that assume that your classification is correct. So it really matters. We also then within, so there's classification, that's the job. Then we have different staff appointment types, right? So we have career appointments, we have contract appointments, we have limited appointments. Here in our school, just roughly, or as of March 1st, we have 91 career and 34 contract and 22 limited. So we have all of these things that are in different, different sizes. Career appointments are where you essentially, after you've passed your probation period, you don't have an end date. Your end date is indefinite. It's not the same as having tenure, but whereas with contracts appointments and limited appointments, there's an actual end date. And with contracts, these are typically seen where the position's funded by a contractor grant, by research funds. Because the notion is it's like there's a specific project to do specific work, and then that work is done, the project's done, the position's done. Although we have contract appointments elsewhere in the school too. And then limited appointments really are meant to be limited. So these are folks that work a very minimal amount, right? Like less than 900 hours in a 12-month rolling period. When we recall staff that work less than 43%, they're put into limited appointments. We have folks that kind of come in and out of this group because they are meant to be not forever. Okay. Oh no, I have more slides. Oh no, but some are the appendix. Okay. Okay, I'll talk really, really fast, okay? And I'm sorry, because then I'm going to blame it on the technical difficulties. So we have a whole team of HR and academic personnel people. And if you go to our For Faculty and Staff website, the very, very bottom, there's a link to this table, which I try my best to keep current, which is how the AP and HR team is organized. But as you will see, we're basically organized around those buckets of employee types, because each type of employee comes with its own sort of rules and processes and like knowledge. And so our team is organized around those same buckets. So for example, staff is AZA, whereas like our professorial titles are divided by Julie Niedermeyer and Julia Schulke. So they do the same work, they have the same job, but because their employee population is large, they're split into two, and so on down the line. Okay. So then, and I think this is the last question. So then there's a question around sort of what if you have an HR issue? And this person said, for example, who's qualified to address issues, how are issues commonly addressed, and what should we do if someone comes to us with an HR issue? I read this and at first I was like, well, it depends, which is like a totally unsatisfactory answer. So that's not what I wrote on the slide. But it kind of does depend, right? What is the issue? Who's the affected employee? But essentially anyone on our HR and academic personnel team, so anyone on that table is qualified to address issues. So those are all HR professionals. With staff issues though, for example, you would go to AZA, because she is our staff HR partner. And she really is, we are all staff in this room. AZA is our HR partner. And she also works with supervisors, and she also works with the dean's office, but she really is a neutral party that is a resource to any of us. Typically, we do try, in terms of resolution, we try to resolve issues informally before submitting a formal complaint that actually launches an investigation. Sometimes we might want to jump to that, but often we try and do informal resolution in terms of having dialogue and having facilitated conversations. But again, it's going to somewhat depend on what the issue may be. And if someone does come to you, then contact the relevant team member. And depending on the situation, right, the supervisor is also at some point going to be involved, because that's a part of their responsibility. I'll call out, though, a reminder about our obligations as responsible employees. So the one of the sort of differences here is if someone does come to you And it starts to become clear that what they're trying to report to you is something that has happened in the sexual violence, sexual harassment area. We are all designated as responsible employees. So if we hear these things, we are obligated to report them to the Office for the Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination. So if someone comes to you and starts to have that conversation, you should sort of say, hey, like, I want to be here for you and I want to hear you out, but know that I have to report what you tell me. And if you do want to talk confidentially, then you can refer them to like the Path for Care Center that is a confidential resource. So that's the one sort of caveat here in terms of like HR issues. If it falls into the sexual harassment and sexual violence space, there's a different sort of set of rules there for good reason.
Which is all in our training.
Yes. Which we're reminded of every year.